My name is Howard Staats. I am a Mohawk from the Six Nations of the Grand River Reserve outside of Brantford. I am a lawyer. I've been called to the bar some 50 years ago, and I have been practicing primarily in the areas of criminal law, family law, some civil litigation. I only do litigation. For the last 10 years, I've been pleased to have my son, Mark, join me in our law firm, and very pleased, very proud today to have my granddaughter, Brenna, also being called to the bar, and she is going to be joining us in our law firm and doing the same practice, same areas of practice that Mark and I do. Very proud of my granddaughter and of my son.
Hello, my name is Grant Wedge. I serve as the Executive Director of Policy, Equity and Public Affairs at the Law Society of Upper Canada. Very pleased to be here at the Call to the Bar ceremony and have had a chance to be speaking with Howard Staats.
I can't really answer that with a definitive, here's what happened. I just always wanted to be a lawyer, and I don't really, looking back, I can't tell why. When we grew up on the reserve, there were very few television sets back in the 40s and 50s. And so people thinking, well, you know, you must have seen a lot of Perry Mason, and that inspired you. Well, that was not the case at all. I can't really say what steered me to practice law, although I can always remember wanting to be a lawyer. And at that time, primarily criminal law. He was an inspiration that he taught me to work hard. No matter what I did, do it right, work hard, prepare to do it. Other than that, though, I think as far as inspiration to become a lawyer, that was 100% in my mother's lap. Neither of my parents graduated from public school. They went to school on the reserve. My mom went to grade 4, my dad went to grade 5, and my dad did not really appreciate the benefits, the value of an education. He would be, I think, quite happy to have me been a worker in construction. My mom, however, realized the value of an education and basically encouraged me throughout, right up until the day I got called to the bar. My mom was always in my corner, always 100% behind me. So I think both my parents taught me different things. My dad taught me to work hard, to be prepared, and my mom taught me the value of an education, both of which I think are now important. Primarily, I think the impact of education. When I graduated, when I went to University of Toronto, undergraduate, there were very few Native people in higher education. Most of them looked at getting your grade, back then, grade 13 certificate as being the achievement as far as education goes. So there weren't many of us who went on to higher education. When I went into law school, as best I know and best I was told back then, I was the only Native in Ontario and only the second in Canada to graduate as a lawyer, to practice as a lawyer, at least in the 60s. And I see that's been a big difference on our reserve, on Six Nations. More and more people now are going on and getting college, university degrees, masters and PhDs. There are a lot of professional people now on the reserve. And just because of that, it raises the general level of the reserve as far as economics, finance, standard of living. So I think that's been a significant difference. I think another one too has been the number of Indigenous businesses that have sprung up on our reserve. Back again, when I was living there were very few businesses. If they were probably farmers. Today there are all kinds of businesses that now are flourishing on the reserve and again, raising the standard of living. I think primarily they would be criminal cases that I've been involved in. I had a number of murder cases where mostly my clients were successful. I can remember one that I was not successful on, but I think primarily those kind of cases. I remember when I was in practice for 6 months, just having been called to the bar. I was retained by a young lad, 16 years old, high school student, who was one of 2 co-accused charged with rape. And as you may remember, back in the 60s, rape was considered to be far more serious than it is now. It was subject to life imprisonment and had to be heard by a Superior Court judge, well, as we then call them, a Supreme Court judge and a jury. And the co-accused had counsel who was some 10 years my senior. I basically ran on his coattails through the preliminary hearing. And after the preliminary hearing, we went to the trial. For whatever reason, my co-counsel did not prepare for trial. He thought his client was going to plead guilty to a charge of indecent assault, which was a lesser charge. The judge wouldn't accept it, so we went on with the trial. As a result of that, the co-counsel asked me, he used to call me Howie, "Howie, would you mind going first? I'm not prepared for this." So I took the lead in cross-examining the Crown witnesses, calling my accused, and the trial went on for 7 days and was in the basically the front page of the second section of the Brantford Expositor, so I got a lot of publicity out of that. My client was acquitted after the 7-day trial, and that's sort of been I think the turning point in my career, turning point after 6 months. And I virtually never had to wonder where my next client was coming from. You know, when you do criminal work, that's the kind of case that gets reported in the newspaper or on the radio, as opposed to matrimonial cases or most civil cases. So that probably was the turning point in my career, and I've been very pleased to have represented a number of people in the criminal area. Now I'm doing a lot of family law as well as some criminal work. The trials are more complicated, they're longer, they take longer to try, and I think the most significant thing, actually 2 significant things. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms, of course, came in what, 82? Was not there when I began practicing. And there's been a decision of the Supreme Court of Canada called Stinchcombe in 1991, which was significant, probably the most significant case of the last, I would say, 20 years, because it dealt with the duty of the Crown to disclose all of their evidence to the defense. That was not an obligation recognized by our law before that. And quite frankly, I remember doing a murder case in 1977 where the Crown did not disclose all of their evidence that they had, kept back what they didn't want me and my client to know. Fortunately, Stinchcombe has changed that. The Crown now must disclose. So I think those are the 2 main factors that I see having changed in the criminal area, the charter and the duty to disclose. Primarily, I think in 1986, the government changed what was then the Family Law Reform Act. It's now the Family Law Act, and it brought in some significant, substantive changes to the rights of women. Previously, if there was a separation or divorce, spouses basically kept whatever assets were in their name. And back, certainly when I started practicing and probably into the 80s, most husband and wives had the family home in the husband's name. And as a result of there was a split up, the husband kept the house. 1986, the Family Law Act came in, significantly changed that, and basically is now saying it doesn't matter whose name anything is in, you split everything right down the middle, including pensions at work. So that's been a significant change in family law. And I think for the first probably 20 years of my practice, I did primarily criminal work, almost exclusively criminal work, and loved every minute of it. But when the Family Law Act came in, I found that I was being consulted more and more by family law clients, and that's basically now probably 60% of my practice, the family law area. No, I can't say I did. And I think you got to bear in mind too that I went to public school on the reserve, met very few non-native people. So I went to high school off the reserve, but I was very fortunate, and I was very involved in the high school life. I was very involved in sports. I played on our school basketball, hockey, soccer teams. Very involved in students' council. I was always a class rep. In grade 12, I was the president of the students' council. So I've always been very involved with non-natives, and that carried on into, I went to Trinity College at U of T, and I was involved again, I played hockey and played basketball there. And I think that provides acceptance, provides an opening for you. So I cannot say I've ever really experienced discrimination or difficult racism or anything like that. Although I can tell you my mom had many instances where she used to tell me when she would be, say, shopping in Brantford, the clerks would very often bypass her when she went up to the till to pay until all of the non-native people had been waited on. She had to stand aside and then she'd be able to pay. I've not experienced any of that, but I know it certainly still exists, but not for me personally. Work hard, be honest. The law can provide, I think, a very comfortable living, but I think the most important thing is realize you've been given an opportunity. You are privileged, and that requires dedication to help others. You're always helping others. I get up every morning and know I'm going to my office. I'm going to be helping someone who can't help themselves. That's an extremely satisfying feeling to be in the practice of law. And I think that's what I would like to pass on to younger lawyers, and particularly my granddaughter Brenna.